Hi.
Hello.
Hi. How are you? Good morning. Oh shit, you're lagging. Or maybe I'm lagging. Wait. Are you in a place with good Wi-Fi? Because I think you're lagging.
Is that better?
Maybe? I think it's caught up a little bit now. Okay.
Yeah? Are we good? I
Yeah,
think.
okay. I
Yeah.
think we're good. Yeah. All right. Hello.
Ooh, let's restart that.
Let's restart. Do you want to introduce yourself a little bit?
Yeah, of course. So I'm Letty, as you know. I am a writer and poet and creative strategist. I have been a freelance writer for like Dazed and The Face for many years now, and in the meantime worked for MØRNING, which is an amazing creative strategy studio in London. I do a lot of trend forecasting, but also a lot of cultural theory, particularly interested in kind of like public psychology, consumer behavior, self and consciousness and philosophy. So yeah, I guess that's kind of my main intro. I'm working on a newsletter at the moment, which is kind of about science and magic and what we believe in collectively. Yeah.
Amazing.
So nice to meet you.
What are you working on now?
So yeah, I'm just working on my new newsletter, which is called Fruit. It's about science and magic and what we believe in, because so much of our reality is like so in flux. I found it super interesting to track, I guess, like the edges of what we're believing as like scientific advances change, technology changes, but also this like huge increase in spirituality, like magical thinking, an increase in religion again, and especially kind of like pagan and indigenous religions. I've just found it so interesting to watch those things rise in tandem. I'm also just like a huge fan of like miscellany, and kind of random like facts and plotted history. So I'm kind of aiming to create like a little mini encyclopedia of random cultural artifacts and what they say about what we believe, essentially. Does that make sense? It will make sense when it's out.
Yes, but I do want to know more about like the magic thing. Like what does that
Mhm.
exactly entail? Do you mean like kind of like the TikTok stuff that people are doing, like manifestation, that sort of stuff, or like more broad sense, or
Yeah, I guess I wouldn't say that I believe in any kind of like supernatural magic, or at least like my whole life haven't done. I've always been very interested in it, but I've always wanted to understand why people believe in it, because I have never like believed in spells or ghosts or like supernatural things like that, but I've always been really, really interested in the psychology and science behind why people believe in that. And I guess I don't know, over time, like the more that I've sat with it and thought about it, the more I've realized, or the more I've been interested in how those kind of supernatural things can be explained by science, and that doesn't mean that they're like not magic. It just means that there is like some really, really interesting psychological and almost like chemical like things that are happening in order to create these like supernatural, or like uncanny phenomena in the world. And I think that the way that, for example, people are using spiritual stuff on TikTok, like doing the manifestations and stuff, I think that's just a fascinating example of how like I don't know that there is like, you know, some kind of like manifestation fairy that is out there and is like, you know, obviously this, like you think this and it'll happen, but that like mass like mental force that is at play and like mental action that's at play, the fact that so many people are doing that, I just find such an interesting development in like public spirituality. I think that's just really fascinating. Find it so interesting how the internet is intersecting with people's belief systems, and how technology is then becoming like a kind of tool for religion and spirituality and belief in itself. So yeah, that's kind of one example of it.
I was just reading as well, like some of the articles you did for Dazed, and it's really interesting as well how, like, I was reading the one about fashion massage because it was the most recent one, and it's interesting as well how there's a return in like traditional beauty practices. I was literally just watching my phone, like some seed oil that like Cleopatra used, and the person was like, "Oh, like apply this on your face every day," and yeah, I guess like, what do you think about that? About that kind of a sort of anti-capitalist, but also algorithmic like return to like natural beauty solutions? I feel like that's also magic in some way.
Yeah, definitely. I think that I'm kind of working on some theories at the moment around enchantment and re-enchantment. Like when the Industrial Revolution and the Enlightenment happened, like in the 1700s, there was obviously this like turn away from like pagan religion and also just religion, and a turn towards science and technology, and with that, over time, like obviously it became publicly acceptable to take science as gospel, and religion and magic and all of that stuff was seen as like not the truth necessarily in the public sphere. Behind closed doors, nothing actually changed. Like people remained fairly steadily religious and fairly steadily believing in supernatural things. Like that actually didn't change loads, but in the public sphere, like the nature of truth like really shifted. And what I'm researching into at the moment is how, because the technology that we have right now is changing so rapidly, it's calling into question like a lot of the science that we have held as truth for like a really long time, and in doing so like really actually dismantling quite a lot of the like truth that makes up this like public conception of reality. So I think that actually is going to spell something like really huge for society and what truth and belief means in society. And then at the same time, obviously people are feeling, for many reasons, this like call back to nature. The earth is like screaming out for us to like pay attention to the fact that we're human, in loads of ways. And I think people are being drawn like consciously and subconsciously towards that like ancestral wisdom, like wisdom of nature. I think it's like, I think that is kind of like the philosophical root of it, and then that becomes like tied to this just like general want for nostalgia, security and nostalgia at a time of like huge change, and then capitalism comes in because people want that, and therefore it's trendy, and therefore it can be capitalized. So I feel like for me, that's how I see that kind of like pathway for the trend towards like, yeah, like natural and ancient practices. I think the rise in kind of like folk and like pagan themed, even just like the aesthetic of kind of folk and pagan stuff, really interesting. I think it's all tied to this same kind of feeling, a need for like a new understanding, but maybe one that we've like always had, in the face of suddenly feeling like the understanding we thought we had doesn't quite make sense anymore.
Right. You live in London, right?
Yeah.
Did you grow up in London or no?
No, I grew up in like deep countryside. I don't know, British people watching this will know Milton Keynes, which is like this really shitty like random town in like the South Midlands. I just grew up around there in like a little village. So yeah, how come?
I just wanted to kind of, I guess, like ask whether that like like how does that correlate to that? Like, do you feel like a personal sense of that, like call back to nature, I guess, or like, or like retro sort of desire for like a slower life pace or anything like that? Since obviously you're working in London and you're also like a writer and strategist and these really hyper modern things. So
yeah, I really do. I'm studying permaculture at the moment, which is like a type of farming and gardening that like creates a kind of regenerative environment, because I want to be able to like leave a city and be self-sufficient at some point, because I also just I grew up like just with lots of wildlife around, and I really like yearn for it. How about you? Did you grow up in a city, and like how do you feel about kind of nature versus technology? Because I do find that my friends that have grown up in cities feel like less of a call to it.
I had a really weird time. I grew up in the suburbs in America, so it's like it's on the surface level it's very green, but it's very much like a contained sort of nature where it's just like there's no biodiversity or anything like that. And you're not really in the wild, like it's just grass and highway. So it's like it's like just from the outside it looks like I guess semi rural, but really it's not. And then I lived in Hong Kong for 3 years, which was really interesting because it's very much like urban, but at the same time, nature is really close. Like you can go to the beach or like go hiking or whatever within like 20 minutes of wherever you live in the city. So that's like almost, I feel like that's the closest that's like to, I guess like you know, solar core like utopic kind of place. I feel like there's only a few other cities that I can think of that function the same, like where like you can really just go and be in an isolated place within like, you know, half an hour, and then obviously now in London, which here nature feels very far away.
Oh yeah. Like actually just like difficult to get to apart from the parks, and like Epping Forest, but there isn't loads.
I do feel like in London it's really like about scavenging, I guess, for places of both nature and literal sense of parks and stuff like that, but also like in like I guess places like these kind of little pocket holes where there's community and like a slower pace of life, like and you kind of like have to work really hard to build those I guess segments in the city, but I don't know.
I think community is such a huge part of it, because like you can't, by the way, have I got really loud drilling outside? Can you hear that?
I actually can't hear it at all, no.
Oh, amazing. Okay. Yeah, I think the community is like a really big part of like being able to not live in a city. And I think like obviously if you're living in a community in like a more rural place, you need people around, and even just to like not have to engage in like a hyper competitive city environment, you need to have like a trusted community, otherwise you won't be able to function. And I do feel as though like as our lives become more digitized, finding that kind of physical community, because digital communities are so enriching, but they can't be practical for like actually just like you know, like a small kind of IRL economy. Like you actually kind of do need that to thrive. And I guess I find it quite interesting how I'm sure you feel this as well. It's kind of what you just described, like being in a city, doing a modern job leaves you kind of like really hungry for that kind of like slower, more like trusted, like small circle of people, and makes it also more difficult to find. I feel like you're constantly racing around, meeting new people, which is like so exciting, but it's really difficult to find that time to like nurture something a little bit smaller and slower, which is like really vital, I think, for like a healthy life.
Yeah. Do you think that kind of, because like I feel like that's a big question that I have, is that do you think that people are going to turn somewhat away from building like online based networks and try and really focus and like hone in on like IRL like spaces of safety.
I guess my instinct is that it will be like a dual kind of reaction. I think that there will first of all be like a trend towards more non-digital events, like social gatherings. I think we're already like seeing a massive turn towards kind of IRL and physical just like social and cultural happenings, especially in London. We're seeing loads of that at the moment. I think that is kind of a reaction to people just wanting like physical connection, but I also think inevitably like it is a trend as well, like it is an aesthetic trend. It feels kind of like glamorous and indulgent to do things like in physical spaces. Like that feels genuinely like exciting and like and yeah, kind of like sexy and like dangerous and like kind of like a luxury to be able to do that, which I think is fascinating. And I'm sure, you know, hypothetically, if like, which will never actually happen, but like if we were to all swing to doing things IRL again, suddenly digital stuff would feel similarly exciting and new. So I think part of it is trend, but I do wonder and kind of hope that we might come to more of an equilibrium, especially if like Web2 social media continues to decline and a slightly more diverse and less toxic social media were to arise. I would hope that we would be able to find like a better balance between the physical and digital realms. What do you think?
What do I think? I mean, I as someone who curates in-person events, I kind of have to hope. I have to hope that you're right. Well, that I do kind of think that people do really yearn, but at the same time, especially in London, I feel like we're really in a place of extreme precarity regarding just like having spaces where it's accessible to do that. Like as someone who's looked for like venues many times in my life, I feel like the deposit they require, or like just the time and energy takes to organize, or like the limits of the like there's just not a lot of venues that are willing to accommodate more creative and low cost and low profit, I guess, spaces of connection. And I think that's a really huge blockage. But I do think that it's happening, and people are really starting to build that up. But yeah, like I think it's really about, it really hinges on like in the city, I feel like it hinges on like 30 to 50 people who have like spare income and time that are really putting in that energy. And I'm just interested to see how those people will progress and stuff like that. But in regards to social media, yeah, like I actually am also really interested in that, because it like you said, it really is declining. Everything is declining, like even Instagram feels like it's declining. And that's like such a big like I guess like blind spot in my like internal plan and my internal like vision for the future, because I just don't know what will happen there at all. So yeah. Do you have any guesses?
I'm so fascinated to see. I think like a lot of the work that MØRNING is who I previously worked for, they do really amazing kind of forecasting around like the future of the internet, the future of the digital world. And we were doing a lot of work, and they still are, about kind of how the internet is creating more like smaller, more niche spaces, maybe employing like Web3 infrastructure. So, you know, it's collaborative and like co-owned and, you know, all of that stuff. I think there's like definitely a hope that that will like finally happen. That was kind of like the original dream of the internet. Yancey Strickler, who is the founder of Metalabel, who I don't know if you've heard of them, but they're like this like, you know, collab platform. He's got this theory about the dark forest, is that right? And it's like how the web, like the internet kind of is this like really dark forest and like and should be that is like difficult to navigate and like invites like exploration, and we're just obviously in a place where we have these like huge capitalist monopolies that we all use, and like there really needs to be some kind of like rewilding in order for the internet to like thrive, and for us too as well as internet users. So I guess that's like the hope. I think honestly so much of it boils down to US politics, as well as consumer demand and consumer behavior. There's like this interesting word which has just slipped my mind, but it's been like done for decades and decades by big brands, basically. Like they create a product, say it's like a Mars bar, and then over the years it like gets worse and worse, which means that consumers are still like loyal to it and still buy it, but they don't realize that it's actually now like the ingredients are a lot lower quality, like the product itself is smaller, but we haven't even noticed. I think it might even be called enshittification or crapification or something like that. But we're really like witnessing that with Instagram, for example. Like we're so loyal to it, like it's such an important like social tool that we use, and like professional tool. Like it is, you know, vital for like or we would say it is for like so many of us. But like over the years, now that they've got our loyalty, like the product itself has become less and yet less orientated towards us and more orientated towards profit. That's like the perfect example of it. And all of that to say, like, is the product going to get bad enough that we are finally going to like jump ship? I think that for me is like the real question. I think politics will determine how bad the product gets and like how we feel about the people that own the products, and then it will also be like down to us to decide like whether we were going to continue to use it. And then the hope is that kind of these like alternatives will spring up that offer the kind of internet that it should have been in the first place. But that's super utopian thinking. I don't know.
Mm. What role do you think that like Substack will play in this future? Because I don't know, I got this email from Substack right when the TikTok ban was happening. That was basically them being like, hey, look at this, like, you know, instability that people are experiencing on TikTok, and we're a platform where 50,000 views. Look at us, like we let you take profit into your own hands, and like you don't have to rely on advertisers and stuff. But then obviously there's still a platform, so like I'm just wondering what you think about that.
I honestly don't see much issue with Substack because it's not powered by really toxic algorithms. Like I think that just is it, isn't it? Like we all know that that's it. It's the algorithms that are making us so sick and sad and divided, and also just like aren't even just like day to day aren't like good for us. I think Substack offers a slower form of media. Written word is a lot less like stressful to our brains. I wrote a piece for Burn After Reading, which is a Substack I used to edit for Morning, about how text, like written like long form text, saw a rise in popularity compared to images. And I spoke a little bit about like the psychological impact that those different formats have on us, and just the fact that consuming an image takes so much more our brains are able to do it so much quicker, that we're able to consume so much more, and they also release like way more dopamine. So the kind of chemical reactions that are happening in our brain as we scroll through TikTok are huge compared to us reading like a long essay. And like there's like a lot of mental strain, as we know, that comes from that. I actually think Substack, in offering like a platform where people can share slower work, is just a really excellent thing for our mental health, and also for the sake of art and thought, because you can't put it all in a TikTok sometimes. Yeah, do you have any doubts about Substack? I'm kind of, I'm not like, oh, it's our savior. I guess I'm just like, I can't see anything wrong with it, I guess.
Yeah, I guess I think obviously there's also the same possibility that over time it could go the same like prefabrication process, I guess. But
Sure.
it really just, I guess, depends on the integrity of the company, I guess, and its loyalty to its like founding generation.
I think it really depends on its business model. I don't know how Substack makes profit. I don't know if they is it like a portion of subscriber fees that they take?
Yeah, they take, I think, 10% of every like fee, basically.
Yeah, that is like such a radically opposing business model to like Meta, because it's not like advertisers. So I think it's like the source of profit which will always determine how a business behaves. So like if Substack's relying on the quality of the art that its users are making, then I guess fingers crossed.
Yeah.
In like a year's time, they're like, hey guys, so we're introducing ads, but don't worry.
That's the thing, but no, maybe that won't happen. I would hope not. Interesting though as well, because you've worked as a trend forecaster, and so I'm guessing you've had to spend a lot of time on TikTok and Instagram and stuff as research. So what does that process look like for you?
I get overstimulated really easily. I spend a lot of time trying to I guess like de-stimulate myself. I actually went to CSM with Morning a couple months back to talk a little bit about my creative process, and my like main and kind of my research process. And honestly, my main point was like just trying to decrease like mental stress at all times. I am just like really sensitive person, have some mental health, like history of mental health issues, and I find being on the internet all the time, consuming that much content all the time, like as a research method, like hugely taxing. I love the thought and I love the analysis and I love the forecasting and all of that, but the research process, like, I find so awful, to be honest. So I tend to just give myself like a designated amount of time, and I don't really use TikTok outside of work, which I know sounds like really wild, but honestly has to be done. I'll just set myself like a designated research time. It will usually be most of a day. I'll do it in like a big chunk, and I'll just like go into as many rabbit holes as I can, and just save loads of shit, write loads of notes, just like absorb loads of stuff and then put it away and just like don't think about it for a bit. I have loads of documents where I just like write down loads of shit that I see. That is how I research like specific stuff. I think the rest of it though is just like vibe. I do quite a lot of like on the ground research. I go to like a lot of events. I try and read like a really wide variety of media, and talk to loads of people. I think like that's probably the journalist in me. I just try and like chat to as many kind of people that aren't like me as I can, just like out and about, and then as I said, just like read media that isn't like orientated towards my peer group, and that often that is like not like a different political leaning necessarily. Try not to read that, although sometimes it's useful. It's useful to understand, of course. But more just like boring, just like I like reading science news. I like reading just like consumer surveys, stuff like that. I find just like a really good grounding to just like keep hold of how people are thinking and feeling, I guess. Does that answer your question? Sorry, I went on a bit of a tangent then, but
Yeah. We spoke earlier about like the, I guess, slight event resurgence in London, and also you've brought it up here as well. Is there anything that you've been to in like the past month that you felt was doing something really new or interesting, or just had a lot of interesting people in one space, you know?
Definitely, yeah, for sure. So I am starting an event which is yet to be announced, which is a non-fiction like lecture series essentially.
Oh my God, sorry, that's so cool.
I know, I'm so excited. Yeah, I'm super excited. Because I think that there is so much interesting, like just miscellaneous knowledge and like niche interest out there. And I really want there to be a space where we can share it and have a bit of a like an adult learning environment, I guess. So yeah, that's super exciting. But yeah, I'll announce that hopefully soon. But I am a huge fan of all of the fiction and like literary poetry nights that happen. I go to a fair few. I went to a really good one recently called New Papers, which was a literary magazine that's just started. Kind of reminds me a bit of Heavy Traffic, obviously the New York magazine that everyone adores. But yeah, New Papers was sick. Yeah, it was like a really interesting bunch of literature, like poems and short stories. A lot of it was like really stylized, which I really liked. And they did like a reading night for the launch of the magazine that was in this cool like kind of town hall sort of thing, and that had a really interesting crowd. I loved going to that. I thought it was really, really nice. Just felt so refreshing to be sat in a room like listening to like fiction for like an hour and a half. Like that is like a lot of focus. Like it was a really beautiful thing to feel, to like concentrate on a piece of art like that is not something you would usually do like on a night out with like honestly like 150 people. Like it was really cool.
Damn, that's really cool.
So yeah, big shout out to them. I also just love going to all the like poetry nights. I read at quite a lot of poetry nights, and that is like another definitely like a big inspiration and like supply of thoughts for me, because there tends to be like a really, or anyway, the ones that I go to, this one called Blue Shout in Peckham, which draws like a really diverse like group of people, like quite a lot of like older people that have traveled from outside of London sometimes, like all different creeds and like occupations. And I always find that just like so inspiring to hear how these people that I would never just like meet out and about like at the pub, really like usually just completely different generations, are talking about like their like deepest feelings. And often it's quite political, often it's just like a lot about mental health, but you manage to absorb so much about like what people are feeling, which is, as I mentioned, like I think what people are like thinking and feeling and believing is like a really important like research interest of mine, because I think it just says so much about the world. Yeah.
When you say nonfiction in regards to the lecture series, and you don't have to reveal this if you don't want to, but I just wanted, I guess, to clarify, like, do you mean like, I guess like cultural research and that sort of stuff that you most directly do, or do you mean more like what people use, like creative nonfiction or like theory fiction and that sort of stuff? Or
I would like it to be a variety. It will basically, again, without revealing too much, like I'll basically ask the speakers to write like a nonfiction lecture about a really niche interest or subject, and they can interpret that however they can. There can be some theory, it can be like a history lesson, it can be a personal anecdote that like feeds into, you know, this particular subject essentially.
Oh my God, that really reminds me of they do this in Berlin, the presentation night. Have you heard of that?
Oh, it's so funny. I heard about this recently because I was speaking to someone. Yeah. I heard about it.
But I love that concept. And I feel like people have made fun of it as well, that people like, oh, Gen Z is like so broke, they're having presentation nights at home rather than like going out to train.
But I love it. God, so much.
Yeah.
I would so much rather like hear my mate give a presentation on something interesting than me just like watch it on TikTok and then maybe like share it with them and then we like chat about it over text and then that's it. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I think that presentation club sounds so cute. Yeah.
That was so good. Do you I guess like it's interesting because like there's a lot more of this sort of like self-made, like I guess like pseudo intellectual spaces popping up. I mean, like Everyone is a Girl is one of them. But at the same time, like I mean, also like lots of schools are reducing in funding, especially in like creative and art sectors and literary sectors. And obviously people have less time, less money on their hands. Do you think that it's true that like anti-intellectualism is on the rise broadly, or do you think that's a bit of a stretch? Or do you think the opposite, actually?
Anti-intellectualism? No, I think that intellectualism has gone pop. Like, I think we're seeing like pop intellectualism. Like, I think it's become cool. And I think that has like made it easier for people to do things like this also with like the budget cuts and stuff in like official intellectual places. I guess you could say that's like an anti. It's funny though, because like, you know, I don't know if you can say that like the rise of like intellectual spaces in like London, which is you know, like the biggest city in the UK, like if that counts as being like anti, because you know it's like the economic like center of the country, which isn't the same thing as being the like intellectual center, but there's obviously like a huge amount of privilege and like education here. So I don't know if that's like a fair representation, but maybe in London I think it's become like more pop and maybe like a little bit more accessible to people that aren't like currently in education. I guess. I don't know how that feels to you that's like more recently graduated and like more closely tied still to like academic institutions, because I'm quite a long way out of the university now. So I didn't do a master's. So I guess I don't know how that like feels to be in like an actual institutional space really now. Yeah, what do you think?
What do I think? Yeah, I don't know. I mean, like I feel like my practice has really developed in tandem with like that need to be pop and that need to like center around, I guess, like PR. Like, and I went to CSM, so like it's very much that the work is indivisible from the medium, and so that's something that I question a lot, whether that like pop quality like can reduce nuance or, but it's really something that's, because at the same time I was encouraged to like make my work accessible and to not like over intellectualize or like push further into the academy what actually is really easy to understand. So it's I guess it's really a battle between like is my work accessible, or is my work like reducing like folds and hidden meanings that do need to be there. And I think it's something that I'm unraveling as I get older. I think also because in the institutions that I've been in, like there really was a blur in the work that I was shown between not only like journalism and academic practice, but also art and academic practice, you know?
Yeah, totally. Yeah, totally. Yeah, I guess as you were speaking, I was like thinking about your work, and it's like if your work is art, and I am so intrigued to know how you do define it. Like if it is art, then anything goes, and like you can have all the nuance you want or like not. But then if you are calling it journalism, or if you are calling it academic research, then what it needs to be like really shifts. I have the same questions about my work too, especially when I'm doing like my personal work where someone isn't like telling me what it needs to be. I'm not it's not for a client, it's not for anyone, it's for whoever I want it to be. I definitely feel like a little stuck sometimes between like, is this like a diary? Is this just a research project? Is this, or like, am I still a journalist when I'm doing this? And like, am I writing for my own publication? Like that is it's really tricky. Do we need to choose? I'm not sure.
Did you do like a humanities degree or an arts degree when
I
you
did
did
English literature and history of art. So yeah, I did a dual degree at Leeds, and yeah, I loved it. I would love to go back into education, but work just got really busy for me out of uni, so I've managed to stay occupied.
Do you feel like the I guess the subject matter that they taught you was relevant there? Do you feel like it's relevant in your practice, or like what's happening in culture now?
I mean, literature, no, but I am sure that I mean, I've always loved writing essays. I've always loved analysing words and art and thought. I'm sure it like helped me structure my arguments and all of that like practical stuff. But for history of art, I wrote my dissertation about I wrote it, oh my god, what was it called? Oh my god, I literally can't remember what it was actually called. But it was basically about the value. It was about like the self as an art object on Instagram. I know. I wrote that. So I'm 27. I wrote that 5 years ago now.
That's very, I guess, predictive. Like
so I basically wrote about how when we share any images on Instagram, they become like a representation of our self, and our Instagram is like a stand-in for ourself and all of that. And I spoke a lot about the mechanical reproduction of images, so a lot of like Walter Benjamin, and just about how the value of when you share an image, like the value of the original image increases because it becomes more famous, but the value of the reproduced image really declines because there are so many reproductions. So I spoke a bit about that. I'll share it with you because I think you'll find it interesting to see that like 2020 2019 like view of what we're like still talking about now.
yeah, literally.
But I wrote a piece for Squad, which is Ganseli Yasinkaya's the publication that she started editing. I wrote a piece for her about selfies and about how we are like cyborgs because we are like recreating ourselves online, and they are like our online self has therefore like furthered the existence of ourself, which again, like I think you'd enjoy. And I went back to my dissertation to look at some of the theories that I was speaking about then, and honestly they still stand. I think that as soon as we started to represent ourselves online, this thing happened where suddenly we existed in like multiple realms. I honestly think that has stayed the same. It's just we have more examples of it and like more to talk about. But I think honestly, like as soon as we did that for the first time, like everything about existence and self changed. So
yeah, I feel like that was really anticipatory because yeah, we're still talking about that so much.
yeah.
Especially as that, like, I guess digital identity becomes highly monetizable. Yeah. I don't know.
I know, crazy. I always look back on that. I'm like, God, I can't believe I actually tend to like forget about it. Yeah, I wonder if I could find the name of it. But anyway.
Did you know when you were in school that you wanted to, I guess, work in trend research and or journalism, or?
Yeah, kind of. I guess I thought that doing trend research and like working in advertising and that kind of like strategy sort of stuff was the practical option. My dad worked in marketing. He always he worked for loads of like chocolate and like sweet companies doing marketing for them, and like but always really loved it. And I kind of thought that was quite cool when I was little because I enjoyed the processes that he was talking about, and like again like the consumer psychology, like all of that kind of stuff I really enjoyed. So I thought that felt like the right choice, but in my heart of hearts, I wanted to be an artist. I wanted to be a writer and I wanted to be a poet. And so I guess I kind of like wrote just in private and kind of just did the sensible thing. And then during COVID, I was like, this is so mental. Like I want to share my art. I want to write. And that's when I started my freelance career. And then my careers kind of grew side by side, and I was able to go into a slightly cooler job than my dad and do kind of like do more like trend forecasting for fashion companies and that kind of stuff. So but I'm working not for I've lost you. Hey.
Hi, you're back.
Yeah, I'm particularly interested after leaving MØRNING. I'm particularly interested in not working brands for a little while and focusing more on academic work. And as I said, like I'm doing a bit of kind of learning about like farming and sustainability at the moment as well. So I'm interested to take a little bit of a break from brand work. I think I really enjoyed the work itself, but I think especially given like the socio-political climate, like it's nice to feel free from those biases and be able to like, you know, have free intellectual thought. And I do quite a lot of like political criticism as well. So I think that felt like the right move for me. But yeah, sorry, just to answer your question, the degree, the degree itself, I just really loved analyzing words and analyzing pictures and just I found that so interesting. I think that's exactly what I've continued to do, like in all of my work, really. Yeah.
I ask mostly because I just watched like a podcast with both Joshua Sorella and him talking about like the relevance of like academic institutions and stuff like that, and whether people have loyalty to them. So I was just interested to see whether that like rang true.
Is that the neoliberalism one?
It was with a podcast called Becoming the Product.
Oh yeah, I love that one. I listened to the Alex Keacho one recently.
I'm about to, really, really cool.
Oh my god, yeah, I love her. It's interesting. I have always been quite academic, and I did really well at uni, and like they asked me to stay on and do a PhD, but I didn't because it was in Leeds and I wanted to move to London. But I have always I've always really enjoyed like academic spaces and always like really had like a yearning to go back to them. For me, honestly, it's the money. Like I don't know if I can afford to do it. Like, if I had it my way, I probably would do a master's and a PhD. Can I afford it? I don't know. Like, you know, it's so expensive. It's just really sad.
Yeah.
So I think more than anything, like, they have a real like allure and nostalgia and like romance to them. It's nice to see these like alternative spaces popping up that may be able to like offer that to people that can't afford to go into education or like back into education. But as I said, I don't really know how like realistic that is as an alternative. But yeah, I don't know. What did you hear in the podcast about their relevance?
He was basically saying that like, although right now we rely on like his Do Not Research project, obviously it relies on like a platform and stuff like that, and kind of building a platformized alternative to academia. But he kind of says that like that's not you always to be able to jump ship and have like an escape route basically, and be tied to some sort of institution or be building the institution yourself. Yeah, that's basically what he said.
That's interesting. Yeah,
but I think personal brand is also somewhat of an institution maybe. So like it's,
agreed.
Yeah. I guess I wanted to return to, I mean, your interest in Everyone is a Girl as well, as one of these sort of quasi spaces. How did you find out about it, or was it through like someone at Morning FYI? Because we got a lot of input from people like all at once there.
It was. Yeah, it was Rihanna Cohen, who's like the amazing creative director at Morning. I'm pretty sure she mentioned you one day in the office, or and then all of us were just fans and like really interested in what Alex Keacher was doing, and then what you guys were doing, and all of that girl stuff. We like wrote a little bit about it at the time. So yeah, I'm so interested in like, yeah, all of the kind of like self-branding stuff that you speak about. I revisited your like thought about like the internet as like a wet space as well, and like the like fluidity of like identity and brand online. I thought that was very interesting, especially as I'm like launching some new work that is actually like owned by me, having to like split yourself and your work into like different spaces, but all on the internet, is like a very, very funny and like odd exercise, which I think you're quite well versed in.
Yeah, I think yeah, it'll be interesting to see what you do with Substack as well, because Substack is such a, yeah, it's really just like you can do whatever you want, which is like crazy, and I found that to be really both alluring and like unnerving.
Quite vulnerable.
Yeah, actually. Yeah, and also because like, yeah, my work has always come from a place of essentially auto theory, or like audio fiction, and honestly like poetic truth, I think, is like what I'm really interested in. And then at the same time, like this almost fanatic like devotion to like, I guess, the history of literature and the history of like pedagogy and stuff. That's I guess where stuff like Everyone is a Girl comes out as. But my Substack is like where I also like work through all of that and like decide what to do, and how to balance all those spaces. And at the same time, it just also just feels like talking, which is really strange. Like it just feels like,
yeah. Do you, when you're publishing Substack, do you like think, okay, this is like a professional piece of work that is going out to like the most important people, or do you find that your like audience is like a slightly closer, like more trusted audience that you think they will grant you a bit more grace for it to be more, you know, unfinished, or like, I don't know, how do you kind of see that like relationship between you and your audience on Substack compared to other platforms?
I feel like even the like UX of Substack encourages you to diary post, like the way that the letters are very big, the spacing between the lines is very small. It just feels very like bubbly and close and like hygge, you know, like really cozy. And so I feel like and I also tend to, on Substack, this is going to be interesting because I'm going to try and do something else. I'm going to try and do a paid option actually, and like start writing actual like essays.
Yes.
But like so far, it definitely does feel like I'm speaking mostly to my friends or like people who just have been around my work for a long time and are interested in the like underside, underbelly of
Yeah.
it. But I also, because I am really interested in growing beyond that and kind of seeing if I can build work around some that has something else besides me or my problems in the middle.
Yeah.
I'm gonna try and move past that and see what else
Mm.
I can do.
Mm.
But it's really strange, especially just because you're working with it as a platform in the sense you're working with a somewhat standardized UX. And for me, like who thinks very visually, like I would really need to be able to play around with that to
Mm.
have a change in how I write as well.
Mm.
If that makes any sense. I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, that's super interesting. I know exactly what you mean about it, like lending itself to diarization. And that's kind of what I meant about like choosing whether your work is going to be art or journalism or like research or whatever it is. Like I'm literally just about to publish like my first edition of my Substack, and I'm like, I'm still like, am I like, hey guys, do I say like it's me? Like, do I say who I am? It's so funny. I don't think I've ever been less certain about like what tone to strike in a piece. Like I've been a writer for years, and I'm like, it really feels like being asked to introduce yourself to an unspecified audience is really difficult.
Do you feel like who do you feel is your audience, or who do you envision your audience to be?
I mean, I think it's just like friends, peers, colleagues. I guess I don't know. Like, I actually don't know that I don't know that like. I hope that it will be like people that I don't know as well. So I think that's where I feel a little bit like uncertain about how formal or informal or intimate or not to be. But anyway, we'll get there.
We're gonna have to finish soon, so I'll just ask you one last question, and this is probably the question you get asked at like every party and everything. But like, what are your biggest trend forecasts for 2025? And do you like what you see? Do you like what you anticipate?
Interesting. Okay, I won't do loads. Let me try and think of the most important, which I think is like what we're already seeing in terms of like physical real life IRL, and that being like really sexy. God, everyone's been talking about like indie sleaze and all of that shit for ages. I do think that like there is like going to be a bit of room for like actual kind of like playfulness in real life. I hope that some young people that were more impacted by COVID are maybe at the point where they can have a bit of fun. And I feel, despite Trump, I feel like because there isn't that like anticipation anymore, I wonder if there's like a little bit of breathing space politically. That sounds wild because like obviously the like socioeconomic like political climate globally is like really terrifying. But I wonder if there's like a little bit of breathing space for some kind of like fun and debauchery just in like the very near future, maybe. Certainly it will like feel trendy to aspire to that. And then in terms of fashion, I think maximalism, like continued lack of trends, personal style, eclecticism, just continuing. I think that like kind of character dressing. I think I saw someone call it narrative dressing, but I'd call it more like character dressing, like dressing as sort of fictional characters that you have made up, especially ones that come from before times. So any kind of nostalgic random kind of character that crucially like does not fit into a trend, that is almost like a self-made kind of like character that you invent. I think that feels like something that I've started to see a lot and will continue to see. Yeah, people just picking really odd pieces of clothing and kind of like claiming that as their own and like creating a personal style out of it that feels very like unique and specific. Does that make sense?
Yes, that's awesome though. That's really hopeful. I like that.
Me too.
Yeah. Okay. Is there anything else that you want to say, or like anything else before we end, basically?
I don't think so. I think we've covered everything that I wrote down, and just huge fan of Everyone is a Girl, and thank you so much.
Thank you so much. This has been a really great start to my day. And yeah,
you too.
I hope you have a good day. I'm gonna like stay on to end the recording, but
all right,
when you're ready. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, lovely. Bye.
Bye.